Multiple choice tests. Ugh, just hearing the words can make you a little tense, right? We've all been there. But what if I told you there's a way to approach them that has nothing to do with luck and everything to do with strategy? Okay, let's get right into it.
Come on, you've heard this, haven't you? Whether it's C for Christ or D for Deuce, it's that classic last-ditch effort when you're just staring at a question, completely stumped. It feels like a strategy, but let's be real, it's basically just a prayer. So, starting right now, we're done with that. We're moving on. Because relying on hope, well, that's not a plan. We're going to replace that prayer with a set of actual, logical strategies that will give you a real edge the next time you're staring down that bubble sheet. Okay, picture this. The proctor says, you may begin. What's your first move? Most people just dive headfirst into question number 1, but the real pros, their strategy starts before they even think about answering anything. That's right, before you even touch your pencil to an answer sheet, take a minute or two and just calmly flip through every single page. Don't try to solve a thing, just get a quick bird's eye view of the entire exam.
So why on earth does this work so well? Well, it's a few things at once. First, it just calms your nerves. You know what you're up against. Second, you get a feel for how tough it's going to be. But here's the cool part. It actually activates your subconscious. Your brain starts working on stuff in the background. And maybe the best part? You might see a term in question 40 that totally helps you answer question number 5. It happens.
All right, you've scanned the test, you're feeling a bit more centered. Now, it's time to actually enter the labyrinth. This is the main part of the exam, where you're going to face the toughest questions and, yeah, some sneaky traps.
Sooner or later, you're going to hit a wall, a question that just seems impossible. Now, your teachers have probably told you to skip it and come back later, and they were absolutely right. But do you know why that works? It's not just about saving time, it's about some pretty cool brain science.
This is exactly what's happening in your head. There's this thing called the Zeigarnik effect, which basically means our brains hate leaving things unfinished. So when you really try to solve a hard problem and then move on, you've opened a little file in your brain that stays open. Your subconscious keeps chewing on it while you answer other questions. Then, when you come back to it later, click, the answer just pops into your head. That's the aha moment, and you can create it on purpose. Let's be honest, okay? Some questions just feel like they're designed to trick you. We call them pegadinhas in Brazil. These are the little traps that test makers love to set. We can't get rid of them, but we can learn to spot them from a mile away. And the golden rule here is simple. Read every single question at least twice. Seriously.
And here are the 2 biggest culprits you need to watch out for. On one hand, you have negative terms, little words like not and except that can completely flip the meaning of a question. A great tip is to physically circle them as soon as you see them. On the other side, you've got absolute statements in the answers, words like always, never, all, or none. Think about it, it's really hard for something to be true 100% of the time, which often makes these options the wrong choice. So beyond just spotting tricky words, we can actually use a few rules of pure logic to weed out the wrong answers. This helps you narrow things down, even when you're not totally sure of the right answer.
Okay, I know this slide looks a little dense, but let's break it down real quick. First, just because a statement is true doesn't mean it's the right answer to the question. Always double check that it's actually relevant. Second, if you see 2 options that are basically saying the same thing, just in different words, they're probably both wrong, since there can only be one correct answer. And finally, the opposites trap. If you see 2 answers that are direct opposites, don't just assume one of them has to be right. It's a common trick. You have to evaluate each one on its own merit.
All right, we're heading into the final stretch. You've been at it for a while, your brain is starting to get tired, and this is exactly when those silly, careless mistakes start to creep in. Let's talk about how to finish strong. So, what's the usual advice you hear? Review your whole test at the end. But think about that. That's when you are the most tired, the most mentally drained. You're way more likely to miss an obvious error. There is a much, much smarter way to do this. And here's the difference. The old way is that one big, exhausting review at the very end. The smart way? Perform mini reviews as you go. After you finish a page, or maybe every 5 or 10 questions, just take 30 seconds to quickly glance back over just that section. Your mind is still fresh on those specific problems, which makes you way more likely to catch a dumb mistake. Okay, I want to share one last strategy, and this one is a bit more advanced. I really have to stress, you should only use this when you're already feeling pretty good about how you're doing. This is for turning that B+ into an A. So as you go through the test, create a simple little code for yourself right on the question paper. Circle the numbers of questions you are 100% absolutely certain about. Put a square around the ones you have some doubts about, and then put a triangle next to the ones that were a total shot in the dark, a pure guess. This gives you a real-time map of how you're doing.
So now let's imagine your test looks something like this. You're certain about 60% of the questions, you have doubts about 20%, and you're completely guessing on that last 20%. Now, we can actually use a little bit of probability to help with those pure guesses. Here's the move. Look only at your certain answers, the ones you circled. Quickly count up how many A's, B's, C's, and D's you have. You see, most test makers try to have a pretty even balance of correct answers. So if you notice that in all your confident answers you've only chosen, say, 5 B's, but 15 of everything else, well, B might be a pretty good bet for those triangle questions where you're just guessing. Now, this is not foolproof. It's a last resort. Always, always trust your knowledge first.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from scanning the test at the beginning to using probability at the end. But I want to close this out with the single most important strategy of them all.
Look, here's the bottom line. All these techniques, they are powerful tools. They can absolutely help you boost your score and walk in with more confidence. But there are supplements, not substitutes. Nothing, and I mean nothing, replaces the hard work of just studying and actually understanding the material. That is what will always, always make the biggest difference. All of these strategies are pretty simple, but they're incredibly effective when you use them. So just think about your own habits when you take a test. Which one of these tips, from that first scan to the mini reviews to spotting traps, do you think could give you the biggest boost on your next exam? Because applying even just one of them could really make all the difference. Good luck.